Welcome once again. This is Karnal Jita. I'm the presenter today. I'm actually the Jacada pre-sales manager for the EMEA and APAC region. Today we're going to discuss how to take the load off the BPO by automating complex data processes and removing the human from repeated back office tasks. Following the question, there will be a Q&A session. Please feel free to type your questions into the Q&A window on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And also as a note, just to protect the privacy of our attendees, only your name will appear in the attendee window. So in this short webinar, the agenda I'm going to follow is I'm going to start by looking at the pains faced by contact center management as they strive to improve efficiency and reduce the costs of back office operations. That leads nicely into Jacada's solution. I'm going to spend a few minutes overviewing that and going into a demonstration of a typical scenario so you can see where the solution could apply to your own business. And then finally, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about some real-life cases where this technology solution has made a difference, so you can see the impact that it could make to your organization as well. And then before we close, I'll take your questions. And as I say, feel free to pop them into the Q&A panel at any time. So, Jacada, we've been involved in many, many hundreds of contact center engagements, back office, front office, and Jacada has lots and lots of experience now for the kind of pains and challenges that you as BPOs face on a daily basis. And if I look at these issues, no matter where the process work an agent is doing, it's for a loan application, or whether it's for a mobile phone number upgrade, or it's entering an invoice or upgrading a customer from one tariff to another, I see three common themes. First is that the process is pretty much a manual one. The back office work is carried out by agents who've got little or no process automation to assist them. And what this means is that the peak fluctuations in the load or the amount of incoming work directly affects the agents in the pool. What that means is that if there's too much work, if there's too much work for the number of agents in the pool, you get delays and you get backlogs. The FTE or the full-time employee headcount needs therefore to be extensive, but if it's too expensive, the drawback is that it's too costly. But there are operational efficiencies you can gain by automating processes, and these efficiencies can be measured for your own ROI, your own return on investment. The second thing that is prevalent throughout the whole of this presentation is that as a BPO organization, you want to make efficiencies, you want to reduce your costs and improve your bottom line, but you're limited with what you can do because you cannot change and maybe you cannot also modify one of the causes of inefficiency, which is the client's application. Why? Well, they belong to the client. You're simply accessing them. For most of the time, this is done through Citrix or similar technologies. The third theme is that Citrix access is provided by your client, and typically they don't allow installing anything into their environment, let alone changing what's already there. So most likely you're accessing these applications of your clients, and therefore you can't modify them. You're accessing them over Citrix or something similar. And as I say, the client won't normally in those situations allow installing any software, including our automation software, on their Citrix server. The impact of this, there's many, but something that's common is long handle times, errors from copy-paste, and you'll see this in the examples and the use cases that we'll talk about in just a minute. So despite the limitations, despite the restrictions, we understand that your organization may be responsible for the accuracy of the data as it's input into multiple applications and systems, whereas it's copied from one into another. And because they're done manually, these can be very error-prone steps. You may also need to enforce compliance with financial or any client regulations. And And you maybe have penalties imposed for not meeting SLAs. So that's the BPO landscape. The challenges and issues that you most commonly are faced with as well. It's one that Jacada is very familiar with because for many, many years we've been automating back office, front office processes using our solutions, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that now. This is a tool called Jacada Integration and Automation, JIA, or JIA for short. What does it do? Well, it's a process automation tool. It's designed to solve exactly the kinds of pains and challenges highlighted earlier. JIA acts like the best agent in your contact center back office team. It navigates through an application and uses it just as like your best agent would. And it does it without making any kind of errors and with as much load as you want to put on it and as much load as your IT infrastructure can handle as well. The process you automate, well, that can be a simple one. It can be very, very short, or it can be something that's very, very complex that involves, lots of applications, lots of technologies, lots of systems. And it does this whether your applications are hosted in Citrix or not. Now, bear with me just a moment. I've got... that's better. You know from your own experience that application data quality errors are a fact of life, right? If the source data that you use to drive the automation has got some kind of quality problem, if there's some kind of corruption of the data or a mistake, that's okay. JIA can catch that kind of error and it can bring it to the attention of the agent for them to review and manually fix it later on. As you can imagine, a perfect scenario would be if the error mustn't halt the process that's being automated. And after notifying the appropriate agent, the process should really continue with the rest of the tasks in the process. And that's exactly what JIA does. And moreover, what JIA can also do is it can notify the agent in many, many different ways of the fact that there's been a problem. It can do this, for example, using email, using SMS, using reporting, and so on. How does JIA work? Well, the very first step is to capture the pertinent information about the process. So that means driving through the whole process from start to finish, understanding how it works. How do you get from one screen to the next? What are the keystrokes involved? What are the mouse clicks, the button clicks? Maybe the data is being entered. And on each screen, which data are we interested in? There may be a very complex screen with many dozens of fields, but perhaps we're only interested in a few of them. So all of this information about the screens, the keystrokes, the button clicks, the keyboard entries, and so on, all of that is all collected, and JIA builds like a complete picture of the process. And for that, it understands also the errors and the exceptions that can occur as a result of the bad quality data. Armed with this knowledge, JIA can replay the process flow, and you should therefore get the perfect, optimum, automated process. And it doesn't also matter if your applications are Windows or they're web applications or even Java applications. JIA has been used in a wide variety of these scenarios on modern and even out-of-date or unsupported applications as well. And as I'm sure you realize, because this is most likely one of the reasons you're attending today, by automating an existing manual process, we can alleviate the load on the manual existing back office workers, or better still, we can redeploy them onto other tasks, other work instead. And that's also where the payback or the return on investment with JIA is realized, by reducing the number of FTEs, the full-time employees that are needed. Jacada has been doing this kind of automation and process optimization for many, many years. So what's actually different now? Well, the previous versions of Jira required a small footprint on the Citrix server. And in the BPO world, that's a potential blocker, but not anymore. Now what Jira can do is it can work on any kind of installation on your client Citrix servers. It doesn't actually need to be installed on the Citrix server. And that's probably the most important point. I'll just stress that. So in a Citrix environment, the automation is installed and carried out on the agent desktop only. Jira doesn't need to have a footprint on the Citrix server at all. And what this means is that you don't need your client to be involved in the automation project. So all the processes that you're doing manually today, that are adding to your costs, they can now be looked at to see if they make the case for automation. And that includes pretty much everything you've got, things like claims handling, sales order entry, batch overnight, data migration or processes, especially including legacy systems, invoicing. These are just some of the examples that we come across on a daily basis. And I'm sure there are many, many others as well. And because Jacada knows that some of the processes need human involvement, human reasoning and decision making, Jira can actually hand over to a human and take control back when it needs to, or when it's told to. And I have to say, with a technology background, I have to say that from that point of view, the IT staff will be happy as well, because Jira when it does this process flow, this handing off to a human, it doesn't need to be involved in any kind of lengthy implementation or expensive heavy lifting projects, such as you would find with workflow or BPM, and so on. I just want to very quickly flash up a picture about the architecture of Jira. We're not going to spend very, very long on this. I just want to point across very quickly. This is a very typical architecture. It's very, very high level. And it's just using this to re-emphasize the point that Jira has got a zero footprint on your client Citrix server. And in this very high-level picture, the client environment and applications are represented by the gray rectangles towards the bottom of the picture. Okay, so that's potentially their Citrix server farm. And the client says Windows Web and Java applications are running there, and most likely you're accessing them over HTTP or HTTPS. And in this case, the agents are also running these virtual applications of the Citrix on the desktop, which is represented at the top of the picture. So you can have automated virtual instances of these applications running server-side for faster performance, and that's shown by the dotted rectangle on the top left. And, we can spend a lot of time looking at this architecture. Very happy to do that, to drill into that in some more depth. Just get in touch with Jacada or myself after the webinar. But the key takeaway from this picture, Jira has zero footprint on your client's Citrix server. Okay, I'm going to drop into a quick demonstration of the technology now. We're going to see it in action over Citrix. But because Citrix and WebEx don't really work together very, very well, and so rather than risk things going wrong, we're going to play a demo of that, and which I can pause and talk as we go along. So I'm just bringing that up, so bear with me just a second. Okay, you should be seeing that on screen right now. Gally, if you could just drop a quick note into the chat window and just let me know you see it, please. Great, thank you. Okay, so this is taken from a use case. In this particular use case, the organization accepts leads from various sources like the internet and so on. The leads are compiled into a spreadsheet. That's what you're looking at now. And an agent in the back office for the BPO organization is then taking each of these leads one by one and then inputting them into Siebel. And the Siebel window is the one in the foreground, or the back, in the foreground right now. So what the agent is doing is they're looking up the name of the company in Siebel, using the details from the spreadsheet, and one by one they're entering all the fields that are required. And they're doing this in a very kind of, I guess, brute force way, one by one, copy, paste, where there's a drop-down list or combo box. They've got to physically select the combo box and scroll down to the relevant option in there. So, it's quite painful. This demo only involves one application, but I know in the real world, there could be multiple applications that are going on. Again, doing a customer search, doing a lookup. Okay, I'm just going to pause it there. You see what's happened here? The agent's made a little mistake. There's a mandatory field opportunity that hasn't been entered. Siebel catches that and flags that as an error. Yeah, so that's just one thing that JIR would need to take into account. But of course, this particular use case wouldn't happen with JIR because it would make sure that all the mandatory fields that it requires have been entered. If there is data missing, then that particular task would get flagged for something to look at later on. Okay, so I think you get the picture. This is what's happening. We're copying, pasting details from one application to another. In the real world, as I say, there would be several applications involved that the agent is then copying and pasting details into. So that's the problem that we're trying to solve. I'm going to I'm just going to bring up the video that shows you what this looks like with JIR. So just bear with me a second. That should be coming up any moment. I'll just give it a couple of seconds just to catch up. I think sometimes videos can run a little slowly over WebEx. Okay, and this is showing pretty much the whole start to finish part of the process. So you can see at the moment we're just about to do a login to Citrix, and in this case it's using Citrix XenApp, as you can see in the title bar of Internet Explorer. So loading that up, and we've logged on to Citrix. There we go. Just about to log on to Siebel. And of course, actually, this is another thing that JIR is very capable of, which is automating the log on to multiple applications. And off it goes. So something has triggered the process. You can't see the back-end spreadsheet, but it's there in the background somewhere. And JIR is reading each record or each row from there, and then copying and pasting the details into each of the individual fields that are required in Siebel. And it's doing that one by one for every single record. Once it finishes that, and again, it's simulating this as if the best agent in the whole contact center was doing this. So the way that it does it is in the most optimum way possible. If there's any errors at all, it'll catch them, and it'll make the operator aware of what those problems are. So this is running on the agent desktop. You may want to run this back on the back-end server, not the Citrix server, but a dedicated server, where it'll run much, much faster than this. And take into account that you may be having multiple instances of it running as well for faster performance. Okay, so I think you get the general idea. And again, we have only one simple example where only one application, Siebel, is involved, but in the real world, and you'll see in the use cases in a few minutes, in the real world, there could be multiple applications involved. Okay, I'm going to pause that and come out of here and just return back to the presentation. Okay, so as I say, you've seen the solution in action. It's a very, very simple scenario. And what I'd now like to do is turn your attention to three real-world examples of where Jira was used and made a positive and it's a tangible impact for our customers. This first example that you're looking at here, this is from a retail company. They're running Citrix, and what they do, it's very typical BPO work, which is order entry, invoicing, and in some of those cases, you know, the input data could be something that arrives as a batch overnight job. In other cases, it may be an email, or it could be items on a spreadsheet and so on. In this particular scenario, the invoices from the supplier, they actually arrive as emails. And attached to the email are attachments of XML or similar, which are the invoice content. What the agent does is they open the email, they open the attachment. After verifying that there's no data corruption or missing data, the agent searches for and opens a supplier record in SAP and copies and pastes the order details from the attachment into SAP. And once they've input the order and there's no errors from SAP, the order gets saved and the agent goes off, gets the next order and repeats the whole process over and over again, as you can see in that cycle of events. So in this use case, what effect did Jira have? Well, those 4 bullets you see on the right-hand side, those are that's the effect that it had. We found that some of the invoices contained data corruption, some of them contained supplier account numbers which were incorrect, which meant that a level of human intervention was required, but despite that, 70% automation was still achieved. And that represents about a 75% reduction in the FTE headcount. In other words, going down from 80 FTEs down to 20 FTEs. And that's a huge saving. So those 75% FTEs, they could be redeployed to something else. The second example, moving on, is a telco. And in this one, the use case is taken from part of a process, it's taken from a part of a process that's carried out by, although it's carried out by front office staff, it applies equally to the back office as well. The telco is running Citrix as well, as a result of a phone call from a customer who wants to be converted from a post-pay contract to a prepay contract. There are 4 applications involved in here. But one of them, just by pure coincidence, was Siebel CRM. 2 of the other ones are web-based, and the 4th one is a very old Java-based application. The work wasn't particularly difficult or intensive, but it does require very careful attention to detail and care over the data that's put into the system, because it is a very error-prone process. The telco in this instance, they had very high call volumes. They had lots of data errors. And as you can imagine, because of the result of that, the customer satisfaction was pretty bad. And this is a perfect use case for Jira. And you can see the results of that by looking at the slide there. In the top left-hand side, the average handle time, or AHT, was 2 minutes 35, and we brought that down by a whopping 27% reduction. Yeah. And the way that is made up is of the 3 figures you see below that. In other words, the process has gone down from 37 clicks down to 8. That's phenomenal. It was a process of 24 steps. We brought that down to 3. And it was a process of 7 manual steps, which we brought down to 1. An interesting aspect of the process flow is that, as I say, it involves part automation, part human reasoning, hence you see the manual steps. So there's still room for an improvement in the 27%, But what it actually means is that there's much less work for the agent to do. And you can see the result on the slides: less clicks, less steps, simpler process. And because the process is simpler, it also means that the training time goes down as well. And that's a huge important factor, especially if you're dealing with seasonal agents and you need a buffer against peaks and troughs in flow. And the final example I'm going to look at is, this is from a telco as well. Back office agents in this scenario, well, they take orders for new mobile phone numbers. And the customer will call, place an order, or the organization will call, place an order for X hundred or however many mobile phone numbers they need to obtain. And what the agent goes through is they go through a very intensive 2 to 4 minutes to update the customer details, activate the mobile phone number. Now, in this instance, there was only one application, but it had dozens and dozens of screens to navigate. So you had many, many windows open, and the agent has to do a lot of data entry. And in some cases, one of the other challenges that they had was drop-down lists had a few hundred items in there, and to scroll through and find the particular item you want was really, really painful. So there's a lot of work for them to do. It's a lengthy process to commit to memory, you know, for the agent to learn, I mean. And they've got to repeat the whole process, sometimes, you know, a couple of hundred times a day. So lots of scope there, efficiency, lots of scope for data improvement as well. And speaking of data improvement, these are the results from that use case. Yet another perfect example use case for Jira automation. We've got between a 70 and a 99% reduction in AHT. We weren't able to get 100%, which is typically what we'd aim for, because a large portion of the incoming orders were images. And OCR, well, that's not 100% accurate, unfortunately. So that section of the process was best done manually. But apart from that, you know, 70 to 99% reduction is a very impressive number. And a nice side effect of the automation in general is that agents no longer have to be fully trained in the whole process. And as a result of that, the training times are greatly reduced, whereas in this case, the ramp-up time, or measure of how long it takes an agent to become fully productive, was cut by half. And this is actually something that's often overlooked, that the training time is reduced greatly because the process itself becomes much simpler. So we're almost at the end of the presentation, and what I'd like to leave you with is 4 key takeaways. The first is that, and as you've seen, Jira can help to reduce the agent, redeploy the agent from repetitive, mundane tasks. Secondly, that represents a cost saving of at least 20 to 30%. Jira works tirelessly. The rules that it creates, that can be built to check for errors, and that will lower the error rate. And of course, the whole solution is Citrix compliant without installing anything on the Citrix server. And what that means to your organization is that you can begin to automate all those processes that you're currently doing manually. And as a result of that, you can save on the costs of existing contracts and be more competitive on new ones as well. So I'd like to thank you for your time and your attention. And now I'll take your questions. And I can see there's been a few posted in the chat box. So bear with me a second. Let me just try and find one or two. And of course, feel free, you know, if you have any further questions as we're doing this, please feel free to just pop them into the Q&A box. Okay, so this one here says, by automating a process with Jira, will it slow my systems down because you're putting another layer on top of Jira? Oh, okay. So that's saying I've got a process. If I automate a process with Jira, is it going to affect performance? Is it going to slow my applications down because in fact you're putting another layer on top of what's already there? Okay, yeah, I see your point. very good question. Actually, the short answer to your question is no. GIA will not affect the performance of that application in that sense, in that way. The first point to make, though, is that GIA cannot speed up the performance of the application. You know, that is what it is. The time that it takes to fetch a record, or the time that it takes to write a record away, and so on, should be exactly the same. But what GIA can do is it can speed up the navigation through that application. If you remember in the demo videos, you know, it takes a moment or two for the agent to figure out, well, which key should I press, and then to locate the relevant drop-down list and the relevant screen and the relevant button. And that can all take some time. But this is where GIA scores. It's actually faster at hand-to-eye coordination than a human. Yeah, so that's the long answer to your question. It won't slow things down. It'll actually speed them up. Okay, I'll just take another question. Okay, it's a question that says, in processes which require some element of decision making and then some data entry based on that, how would GIA work? Yeah, that's a perfect use case for GIA. It can certainly be involved in automating the application. And if, as I say, you need some kind of human decision making or human reasoning, it can hand control over to the agent. And how you hand that over is totally up to yourself. There can be a pop-up message, there can be a pop-up window, or you may have some kind of graphic way which is showing the agent what is the progress through a particular process, and then at a particular point hand over to them. And once they've done whatever they need to, it will continue with the rest of the process. So that can all be very seamless. It can all work without being painful, of course, to the agent. Okay, I'll take another question. Okay, this is a nice, short, easy one. It says, have you got a sales agent or office in India? Yes, absolutely we have. We have a gentleman, Vivek Anand, who's the country manager for Jacada, India, based out of Pune. And certainly we will, I'll pass your details on to Vivek. Let me just take another one. Okay, this says we're using Siebel 7. We want to copy customer data from 4 tabs, which are on different pages of Siebel, and then combine that with customer information from other web applications. Can GIA do that? Okay, what you've just described there is something that we're just doing the proof of concept for. It sounds very, very similar. I'm guessing you're the telco, and I'm guessing that those 4 tabs you mentioned are information related to that customer. So the use case that we're working with, which, as I say, sounds very similar to yours, for the telco, customer calls and says, look, I've got a big bill, I don't agree with it, or I've got a balance of my bill, which I believe is wrong. What the port agent has to do is bring up the customer record, and certainly in certain versions of Siebel, there is no one screen they can go to get a full picture of what is that customer's usage. So they end up going into one tab to look at all the SMS usage, another tab to look at all the calls, phone calls, another one to look at data usage, internet usage in other words, and maybe another one to look at all the VAS or value-added services for that customer. So what GIA is doing, and of course there's a couple of other applications the agent needs to go into as well for other pieces of information. So to complete the picture, what I've seen the agent do in some cases is copy and paste these details into a spreadsheet, and then they have one spreadsheet or one place where they can look at this information. Now, GIA is perfect for this kind of thing because it can read the information from these 4 tabs, it can present that to the agent, and it could save a lot of time and a lot of inconvenience, of course. It can allow the customer to be much happier as a result of that. So it doesn't really matter if that data is coming from just the one application. It can come from multiple. And what Jia can do is bring it all together into one window. If you have an existing agent desktop, great. Jia can deliver it to that desktop and allow you to display it in the way you wish. Or if you want to use Jacada Workspace, which is Jacada's own unified agent desktop, then that's good as well. It can display it within there in a relevant window. So I hope that's answered that question. Let me just take another one. We're not going to have time for all of these, I'm afraid. There are lots that are being posted, but I do promise we will get back to you on the ones that we haven't answered. Okay, so some of these we're going to have to leave. They're too complex and require quite lengthy answers, but here's a relatively short one. It says, I've got an overnight process. It takes customer credit card data from a spreadsheet and uses it to update several applications. We do this all manually. Can Jia help automate the task? Yeah, absolutely it can. Actually, what you just described there is the demo that I was showing earlier. We had one spreadsheet that contained customer lead information. I think in your case you were saying you've got credit card data. Sounds very, very similar. But yeah, you can certainly use Jia to drive an automated process where it's copying and pasting those details into multiple applications and managing any errors and exceptions that way. Okay, well, we have run out of time. I apologize for that. There are several other questions which we haven't been able to get to, but we will need to conclude our webinar. Attention BPOs, say goodbye to manual processes. Thank you very, very much for attending. I do promise we will get back to you on the questions that we weren't able to answer today. And a replay of this event, we will make it available on Jacada.com. If you would like a copy of the slide deck, please feel free to reach out to either Jacada or myself. That's kjita at Jacada.com. And thank you again for attending today. Please visit us again at Jacada.com and have a great day.